Okay, so nonlinear inequalities. So for circles, anytime you have a circle, we'll draw a couple of little circles here. Okay, if it is less than or equal to, you're going to shade inside the circle. Okay, so any less than or equal to, that means shade inside the circle. And then if we have greater than or equal to, that means shade outside the circle. So, like that. So less than means shade inside, greater than means shade outside for circles. All right, for parabolas that open up. So for less than and greater than, think of it similar to the lines. For less than, we shade below. For greater than, we shade above. Okay? So for less than, this one, if we were shading below this, that would be here. Okay, so less than means shade below, or you might think that's kind of outside of the parabola. And if it's going up and we're shading above, that means inside the parabola. And then we have parabolas that open down. So less than means shade below. So if it's going down and you're shading below it, that's inside. So still think below, but this time it's kind of inside the parabola since it's going down. And then for greater than, we would shade above, which in this case is like outside the parabola. So go ahead and write that down. We've got y is greater than or equal to negative 1/2 x minus 1. That's a line, y equals mx plus b, okay? And then we've got y is greater than or equal to negative x squared plus 4x minus 1. That's a parabola because you have the x squared part. And then draw like a little sketch of this. Okay, so for this one right here, we're shading greater than right here. So for the line, you need to know it's a line. It says y is greater than, so that means shade above, all right? So you could kind of go like this. If we're shading above the line, that would be regions A and B, all right? A and B are above the line. And then we've got y is greater than or equal to this parabola. So greater than means above. It is a downward parabola, so technically above means outside. So for outside the parabola, that would be regions A and C. So for it to be true for both above the line and outside the parabola, which region is that? A. So the region that should be shaded in is region A. You're not going to have to do that on your homework. You're just going to say region A, all right? And then you have to prove it to me by testing a point. Yeah, this one has a nice one to test. We can test 0, 0. All right, show me the substitution here. So 0 is greater than or equal to negative 1/2, and instead of x, we're plugging in a 0 minus 1. So this is the line. Okay, that cancels. So 0 is greater than or equal to negative 1. That is true. All right. Now we plug in 0, 0 for our parabola. 0 goes in for y, and 0 goes in for x. So that's 0, that's 0. 0 is greater than or equal to negative 1. Y self? Yes, it is. It is greater than. So it's true. A is correct. We got it right. Okay? Okay, so go ahead and write this one down. We've got a line, a parabola, sketch graph does not have to be perfect. So we've got y is less than negative x plus 1. So for the line, we are doing less than. So Margaret, if it's less than, do we shade above or below the line? Good. So this means shade below the line. So for shading below the line, that would be regions C and B would be below the line. All right, then we have y is greater than or equal to the parabola. So if it's greater than Wyatt, and we've got this upward parabola, greater than, meaning above, would be inside or outside? Inside. Since it's going up, above would be inside. So that would be A and C, okay? So the only true region that proves both of them, below the line, inside the parabola, is region C. Now we need to test a point, okay? So Ethan, what's a good point to test inside this parabola? Maybe like right here. Yeah. Okay, negative 2, 0 would be a good point to test. So we plug 0 in for y here. And I have a negative, and then I'm plugging in a negative 2, and then plus 1. So this is the line. Negative, negative makes a positive 2, plus 1. So 0 is less than 3. Is that true? Yes, 0 is less than 3. Now I'm going to plug in negative 2, 0 for the parabola. So 0 goes in for y. Greater than or equal to. Now I'm going to plug in negative 2 squared plus 4 times negative 2 plus 2. So negative 2 squared is positive 4. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. 4 minus 8 is negative 4 plus 2 is negative 2. Is 0 greater than or equal to negative 2? Yes. So we guessed right. Region C is correct. Okay. All right, we have not done a circle, so let's try a circle. Okay, quick sketch of a circle and a line, and write down the inequalities. So you have to remember the circle. So on the first one, right, we have less than means inside the circle, greater than means outside the circle. So for less than, we have what, inside or outside? Okay, inside the circle. So that would be regions A and C. Okay, so we're somewhere inside the circle. And then I have y is greater than or equal to x. So for greater than, Zeb, do we shade above or below the line? Above. Okay. So for above the line, Sebastian, is that A or C? Good. A is above the line and inside the circle. So this would be A and B for above the line, right? But then our winner is A because it is both inside the circle and above the line. And then we would need to test a point. Can you test 0, 0? No, because it's on the line. So, Nolan, what's a good point to test? Okay, 0, 1 would work. So 0 goes in for x, 1 goes in for y, okay, which gives me 1 is less than or equal to 16, which is true for the circle. And then 1 goes in for y, and 0 goes in for x. 1 is greater than or equal to 0, so true, true. We got it right.